When I got back to the game, I was getting very upset and confused. I thought about the way the monster looked at me. The game couldn't have heard what I said. That's impossible. It had to be a random occurrence. But why did it happen precisely at the moment I insulted the monster? Nothing about this game made any sense. The new Godzilla monsters, the weird replacement monsters, out of place imageries like the green temples, quiz levels, and the red monster chases. It didn't seem to add up in any kind of meaningful way. If it was a prank, it was never funny in any way I can understand. And they clearly put far too much effort into it. If they were trying to make a genuine sequel with new Godzilla monsters, then why did they add everything else? Maybe it was some kind of art experiment. Some group project made by a bunch of really talented and crazy people, and they lost the cartridge somehow, or maybe they intended for some random person to find it. It was all just fruitless guessing. As far as I could tell, there is only one way to figure out what the deal was with this game. To play it through to the end. Maybe, just maybe, there will be something in the credits. An explanation to the creators as to why they made this. Or it could be something more cryptic and strange. Maybe even something horrifying. Before I got a good look at the Dimentia board, I considered replaying Trance to see if the red monster would look at me again. But I decided against it. I wanted to keep moving forward. And I was also somewhat worried that backtracking might cause the game to become even more strange. The Dimentia board sounded a lot like the Saturn music, except it was slowed down and played with a piano sounding instrument. Like most of the new map themes, it had a dangerous suspend theme. While listening to the music, I looked at the Dimentia board. There were 4 boss monsters this time. Space Godzilla, Gigan, Manda, and Baragon. I was surprised there were 2 new Toho monsters this time. But the best surprise was still to come. I started the quiz level. Here's another list of results in the same format as the last one.
Can you swim?
Yes.
Do you like fish?
Yes.
Can penguins fly?
No.
Can it spin in all directions?
There was no clarification of what Face meant by it, so I just guessed no.
Do you breathe oxygen?
Yes.
Does it taste good when you fight a woman?
I don't know who came up with this question, but I really hope they're getting mental help. No.
Is it night where you are?
Yes.
Do you like cats?
Yes.
Is water wet?
Yes.
Have you ever broken a bone?
No.
Do you like your job?
Yes.
Would you like a new monster?
I wasn't entirely sure at the time what Face meant by new monster, but I couldn't resist answering yes just to see what would happen. The result was mind-blowing. The game took me back to the board and I had a new playable monster in the form of Anguirus! Ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to play as Anguirus, since he was my second favorite Godzilla monster. And plus, I never liked Mothra all that much anyway. I moved my new Anguirus piece over to the level right next to it, eager to test my new monster. Before I get into the level description, I'll talk about Anguirus a bit. Using the up and down buttons, you could choose whether Anguirus stood on a bipedal stance or crawled around on all fours. It was a huge difference, but being able to stand was helpful in boss fights, and crawling sometimes helped dodge obstacles and attacks. He could punch and kick like Godzilla, but no tail whip. Instead, he had something far more interesting. The ability to curl up into a spike ball of death and roll around. You could still take damage, but it was a lesson. It was a good way of clearing out stage enemies, but unfortunately, doing this also drained the power bar. But the spiked ball wasn't his only special ability. When you press start, he would fire a beam of energy from his mouth. It resembled Titanosaur's sonar attack. If this were a hack, it may have been inspired by the roar attack from the Atari's Godzilla fighting games. Also of note is when playing as Anguirus, the level meter gets glitched up. Judging by the life and power bar, I'd say he's on level 10. Now, onto the level. As you might have guessed from the level icon, these levels are green paletted swamps of the ground and background tiles from the blue mountains. But what immediately caught my attention was the water, which has a transparency effect. Was that even possible for an NES game? I know the Super Nintendo could do it, but I've never seen a transparency effect in a game on an NES. The Green Mountain music was played by the same instrument as the Blue Mountains, but the melody was totally different. It was a very simple song with a loud abrupt pauses, followed by a loud note every few seconds. Anyway, I went through a usual strolling through the level, and again there were no monsters or anything. But pretty soon I had reached a cliff above the water. There was nowhere to go now but into the water, so down I went. The water transparency made things a bit harder to see, but it's tolerable. After going underwater, I encountered two new enemies, a giant piranha and some kind of spiky bottom feeder thing. I liked the piranha more because I could easily tell what it was. It was a sane enemy design that would appear in a real game, and there were a few enemies like it. They didn't take much hits to kill, but they were quite annoying and could considerably trim down your life if they get close enough. They also tend to travel in packs. As for the bottom feeders, they're easy to deal with. They swim along on the bottom of the screen towards you and are easily crushed with the roll attack or jumped over. In the screenshot, you could see me about to run over one of them, and there's a pack of piranha behind it. After I beat that level, I moved Godzilla onto the blue castle icon. I started the level, and I got a title screen with the text, "Unforgiving Cold." The level itself looked like a castle dungeon made of blue bricks with the rows of identical white statue faces on the walls. These statues had a permanent look of horror on their faces. There was also some flickering gray static, which didn't obscure my vision, but it adds to the very unsettling mood of these levels. The music was a 12-second loop of a low-pitched choir vocalizing that sounded very familiar to me. Whenever I played through one of these levels, I got this sudden, horrible feeling of anxiety. I had the feeling that the farther I progressed through the level, the closer I was getting to something very unspeakably evil. There weren't any enemies, but these were some of the longest levels in the game. I only played one level, but it took 7 minutes to complete. I didn't want to admit to myself at the time, but I realizing playing the Blue Castle level, this game has the power to make the player feeling certain things. I didn't mean in the sense that you get irritated playing a crappy game or getting unnerved by something scary in the game. What I mean is that certain events in this game can instantly make you start feeling something. I know that sounds completely insane, and I don't blame you for not believing me. I wouldn't believe any of this either if I didn't play the game myself. But there is something very, very wrong with this game, and I still don't know how to explain it. So then it was time to fight Baragon's replacement. Although Baragon was originally the smallest monster in the game, his replacement was the largest. It was so tall, in fact, that the ground was noticeably lower, and not Baragon's head still barely avoided collision with the bar on the top of the screen, and he was just as frightening bizarre as he was huge. You may be wondering how he attacks without arms. Well, he has the most powerful kick in the game, but his other fighting technique is much stranger. First, he blasts a cloud of pixels down at you from his breath, which causes you to freeze. Then he walks back to the corner of the screen and extends a huge Gatling gun from his abdomen. That might seem amusing to you, but it certainly wasn't to me when I was playing the game. This attack is almost as annoying as Gigan's buzzsaw, and not Baragon could have been unbeatable if he consistently used it. Thankfully, he did it twice while fighting him. Once you unfreeze, you can run up and start damaging the gun, which does extra damage to him. This helped me to destroy him. Then, it was time to play the third level type. I decided that I was going to use Anguirus to fight Manda and Gigan, and then fight Space Godzilla as Godzilla. It was only fitting. Before getting to the battles, I'll describe the level type. The Arctic. The Arctic is exactly what you'd guess from the name. An icy tundra with a few watery segments. The music reminded me a bit of the Northern Hemispheres from Donkey Kong Country. In 8-bit form, a very dangerous sounding song. It made me think I was being trapped in the tundra and freezing to death. There were two new enemies in the stage. The first was a creature frozen in a block of ice. They block your way, and you have to use the atomic breath to thaw them out of ice. They look a bit like a smaller version of Not Godzilla, only without the eye. When freed, they'd do a strange crawling movement and push you backwards. It doesn't cause any damage, but it's a bit annoying. After dealing with the Iceman, I kept walking for a minute or two and came up upon a water segment. I jump in, and this time I managed to get a screenshot showing how the water splashes when you jump in. I don't know how they programmed that, but it's pretty impressive. Another interesting thing is how the screen changes when you go underwater. Here you can see in another new enemy, a little thing I called Spike Walker. They walk towards you and explode randomly or instantly if you attack them. Sending spikes in every direction, the spikes don't do much damage, but they did get me dangerously close to falling into a pit a few times. Oh, and speaking of the pits, don't go into the water. The game has a platformer element, bottomless pits. There weren't any of these in the original game, since it was strictly an action game. But the pits were a neat addition. After getting back on land, I encountered a very unexpected mini-boss, Magoma, the wireless kaiju. I know this game has some obscure monsters to begin with, but wow! Now that I'm complaining, it's a pretty cool cameo for an unappreciated kaiju. Magoma's fighting tactics were very simple. He had a freeze beam and he could charge into you. Not very challenging, but certainly more entertaining than the Matago mini-boss in the original game. One interesting thing about Magoma is that he doesn't die when you defeat him. He turns tail and retreats. This was the first time I have ever seen an enemy monster change directions, let alone retreat. I tried to chase after him, but he disappeared after I got into the water. Poor little bastard. And that does it for the Arctic. I'll talk about the Manda fight next. I forgot to mention before, but the music that played during the new monster fights is reused from themes actually in the game. So far the themes have been Gizora's music for Titanosaurus, Hedorah's music for Biolante, Baragon and Mogera's music for Orga, Varen's music for Manda, and Mechagodzilla's music for Space Godzilla. As for the fight, Manda was a fairly crafty opponent. When it realized one tactic was effective, it would immediately charge to a different one. Manda has quite a few tricks, like spitting fire, biting, and most irritating of all, constricting. It doesn't mercilise drain your life down like Gigan's buzzsaw, but was by far Manda's strongest attack. One last thing to note that I found pretty cool was that the Gotengo showed up during the fight to help me out. Manda crushed it with ease, but it was still pretty cool. After I slayed Manda, I went through an Arctic level for health power-ups, and then it was on to Gigan's replacement. When the fight started, I was very confused, because there was nothing there. I thought this was going to be like the Titanosaurus quote, "Fight!" in Pathos. But just the time it would have been going back to the map, a piranha appeared on screen. But it wasn't there for long. As soon as it appeared, the speakers emitted an ear-splitting screech! And not Gigan flew in and ripped the poor fish to pieces. Well, that's one way to get the player on the toes. That abrupt entrance scared the hell out of me and got my adrenaline rushing, which in retrospect was a good thing because Not Gigan was one of the fastest, most unrelenting opponents in the game. Not Gigan was tough, but my new skills with Anguirus helped me out, even in this score. This was still an incredibly intense fight. Not Gigan's attacks consisted of some kind of blood laser he spews from his mouth, and a downward slash. I was expecting some hellish variant of the buzzsaw attack, but thankfully, there didn't seem to be one. The howl attack was valuable in defeating him. I would have taken more screenshots of the fight, but I really had to concentrate. After that, there was just one monster left to take down. Space Godzilla. As mentioned earlier, I used Godzilla for this fight. Space Godzilla's fighting technique was rather frustrating, but admittedly a clever idea. Space Godzilla will use his energy to create two flying crystals which would reach the ground and become crystal spires. These spires not only block you from reaching Space Godzilla, but it allows him to consistently recharge to full energy and blast you with a deadly full charge beam until you broke the spires. Space Godzilla eventually drained his own spires of energy until they shattered. But if you waited for that to happen, you'd probably lose a lot of health. Heat beams actually seemed to re-energize the spires, so you had to use the physical attack. When you finally got close enough to hit Space Godzilla, he was no pushover. When I punched him, he hit me back just as hard. Space Godzilla does everything in his power to knock you back to the corner of the screen, so he could create more spires. By the time this was over, I only had 5 life bars left. But it didn't matter, because I didn't need to fight anymore. I needed to run. Here we go again. I decided right then that I really wanted to see the end of the game. As terrifying as these levels could be, I had to beat them to get through. I decided that no matter what happened, no matter what the game showed me, I was going to get to the end. And I also make sure not to say a damned word while playing a chase level from here on. For this chase, I tried out Anguirus, since his roll attack actually allowed me to move faster than Godzilla or Mothra. The chase started off like the first two, expecting there was a river of blood below the ground. I was beginning to get the hang of it, and extra speed from the roll helped me get an edge on the red monster. Especially since I didn't have to worry about a power limit and keep my rolling endlessly. Like the previous levels with water, the ground inevitably reached a stop, so I rolled off into the blood. To my surprise, the hell beast didn't follow after me. It stopped at an edge of the ground and grimaced. I guess it can't swim, I thought to myself. So I went under blood and continued moving on. There wasn't anything around, but I knew something was up. The chase wasn't going to end that easily, couldn't? Surely something else had to show up, and sure enough, I heard the horrible bellowing roar. Sounded slightly different. And the monster was following after me in a new aquatic body. I had no idea it was a shapeshifter. After it reappeared, the chase started to get into the difficulty I had expected. Being submerged slowed me down, putting me and the beast at about the same speed. The only thing that would keep me alive was fast thinking and reflexes. I encountered some bottomless pits, in which the mines floated up from. I assure that if you hit one, it would damage you and knock you back, considering how fast me and the red monster swims. Hitting by the mines would be instant death, so I went through great effort to avoid them. But that wasn't all I had to be wary of. Halfway through the chase, the Hell Beast revealed yet another surprise. A tentacle formed of intestines and tipped with a claw set of its jaws burst from its mouth, trying to pull me in and devour me. I only barely avoided both the tentacle and the mines. I could tell the beast was getting very desperate, because the chase was nearly over, and about a minute later, I had spotted a bit of ground to serve as the exit. I leaped with all the might I could muster without breaking my controller. The beast screamed with rage and jumped out of the blood river in one last attempt to drag me in. But I escaped its grasp this time. I fell back onto my bed and took a deep breath, satisfied with yet another successful escape. Now I was headed to the fifth world. Entropy.